The scent of pine and wet earth filled my lungs as I knelt by the river's edge, scrubbing at the stubborn stains on my only good dress. Autumn had draped our small village in amber and crimson, but the beauty of the season did little to warm the chill that had settled in my bones since Mother's passing 3 moons ago. The forest around me buzzed with life. Birds calling, leaves rustling. Yet I felt strangely disconnected from it all, as if viewing the world through clouded glass. I'd chosen this secluded bend in the river deliberately, away from the bustling washing rocks where village women gathered to gossip. Their whispers followed me everywhere. Poor Alara, all alone now. Strange girl, always keeping to herself. No wonder she hasn't found a match yet. At 22, I was already considered past my prime in our small community that lived on the borders of shifter territory. The cold water numbed my fingers as I worked, my pale blonde hair falling from its loose braid to curtain my face. I didn't mind. The physical discomfort was almost welcome, a distraction from the hollow ache that had become my constant companion. "You'll find your strength in stillness," Mother used to tell me, pressing her silver pendant into my palm on quiet evenings by the fire. It hung around my neck now, the weight of it against my skin a constant reminder of her wisdom. When others rush forward, you'll see what they miss in their haste. I traced the pendant's intricate tree pattern, wondering what Mother would make of my life now. The village elders had been kind enough to let me keep our small cottage after her death, but their patience was wearing thin. Without family to speak for me or a husband to provide, my position grew more precarious with each passing day. The pendant suddenly warmed against my skin, an impossible heat that made me gasp. I looked up, startled, my senses suddenly alert to a change in the forest around me. The birdsong had stopped. The wind held its breath. Something was wrong. That's when I heard it. A splash and a frightened yelp that pierced the unnatural silence. I rose to my feet, water dripping from my skirts as I peered downriver. There, thrashing in the current where the river bent sharply and quickened its pace, was what appeared to be a child. No, not a child. A pup, a shifter pup in human form. My blood froze. Everyone knew to stay away from shifter affairs, especially those of the northern pack that ruled these territories. Their kind kept to themselves, appearing in our village markets occasionally to trade, but never to socialize. They were stronger, faster, more dangerous than us in every way, and they protected their young with deadly ferocity. Yet there was no time for fear or careful consideration. The current was dragging the small form toward the rapids 1/2 mile downstream, rocks that would show no mercy to the tiny body fighting against the water's pull. "Hold on," I called out, already moving along the riverbank, my dress catching on brambles as I ran. The pup's head disappeared beneath the surface, then bobbed up again, small arms flailing. A boy, I could see now. No more than 4 or 5 years old, with dark hair plastered to his pale face and eyes wide with terror. Without another thought, I plunged into the river. The cold stole my breath, but I pushed forward, my limbs protesting as the current tried to claim me too. Mother's pendant burned against my skin as if urging me onward. Years of swimming in this very river as a child had taught me its moods, its hidden strengths and weaknesses. I knew to angle my body, to work with the flow rather than fight it directly. "I'm coming," I gasped as I neared the struggling child. Reached for my hand. His terrified eyes locked with mine, and for an instant, I saw something beyond fear in them. A flash of something ancient and knowing that seemed out of place in a face so young. Then his small hand shot out, grasping for mine with surprising strength. Our fingers connected, and I pulled him against my chest, turning to face the current and kick back toward the shore. The pup clung to me fiercely, his small body trembling against mine. I could feel his heart racing, matching the frantic beat of my own. "It's all right," I murmured, though my teeth chattered with cold and exertion. "I've got you." We made slow progress toward the bank, each stroke a battle against the river's determination to carry us toward the deadly rapids. My muscles screamed in protest, and my lungs burned for air. Just as my strength began to falter, my foot found purchase on the riverbed. With renewed determination, I pushed forward until we reached the shallows, then collapsed onto the muddy bank with the child still clutched to my chest. For several moments, we lay there gasping for breath. The world narrowed to the simple miracle of air filling our lungs. The pup's body was unnaturally warm against mine, a reminder of his otherness, of the predator blood that flowed through his veins even in this vulnerable human form. "Are you hurt?" I finally managed to ask, gently setting him down beside me to examine him for injuries. He shook his head, water droplets flying from his dark hair. "No," he said, his voice surprisingly steady for one who had been moments from death. "You saved me. What's your name?" I asked, wringing water from my soaked braid. My dress clung to me like a second skin, and I suddenly felt very exposed. "Nico," he answered, then added with childish pride, "Prince Nicholas of the Northern Pack." My heart stuttered. Not just any shifter pup, but royalty. The son of the Alpha King himself. I'd never seen the king, but tales of his ruthless strength and fierce protection of his territory were whispered even in our remote village. What was his son doing alone by the river, so far from their protected lands? "Where is your—" I began. But the words died in my throat as a low, rumbling growl cut through the forest silence. The hair on my arms rose as an enormous gray wolf emerged from between the trees, his massive form blocking out the dappled sunlight. Eyes the color of molten gold fixed on me with predatory intensity, assessing, calculating. Even in animal form, there was no mistaking the power and authority that emanated from him. The Alpha King. Nico scrambled to his feet. "Father, I'm okay. She saved me. The river pulled me in when I was chasing the rabbit, but she jumped in and got me out." The wolf's gaze never left mine, even as his son spoke. I remained frozen, kneeling in the mud, acutely aware that one wrong move could mean my death. Shifters were protective of their young to the point of irrationality, and I, a human, had my hands on a royal pup. Slowly, deliberately, I lowered my eyes and tilted my head to expose my neck. A gesture of submission I'd heard was important to their kind. "Your Majesty," I whispered, my voice barely audible above the rushing of the river. I meant no harm. The prince was drowning. The air around us seemed to ripple and shimmer as the wolf's form began to change. I kept my gaze averted, but from the corner of my eye, I could see the beast reshaping itself, elongating into the form of a man. When the transformation was complete, I heard footsteps approaching, human feet now, but no less dangerous. "Look at me, human." His voice was deep and rough, as if he didn't use it often. I raised my eyes slowly, still keeping my head slightly bowed. The man who stood before me was tall and powerfully built, with the same golden eyes that had assessed me in wolf form. His face was all hard angles and sharp planes, framed by dark hair that fell past his shoulders. A jagged scar ran from his temple to his jaw, giving him an even more fearsome appearance. He wore only a pair of leather breeches, his broad chest bare despite the autumn chill. The royal mark of the Alpha was tattooed over his heart, a howling wolf encircled by ancient runes. "What is your name?" he demanded, his eyes never leaving my face. "Ilara," I answered, trying to keep the tremor from my voice. "Ilara Blackwood. You put yourself at risk to save my son." It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. "Anyone would have done the same, Your Majesty." His laugh was short and harsh. "No, they wouldn't. Most humans would have run the other direction at the sight of a shifter pup, let alone the heir to the Northern Pack." He stepped closer, and I forced myself not to shrink back. "Why didn't you?" I thought of all the calculated answers I could give, ones that might please him or assure him of my harmlessness, but in the end, only the truth came out. Because he's a child, and he was drowning. Nothing else mattered. Something flickered in those golden eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or curiosity. He tilted his head, studying me as if I were a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. Then he reached out, one large hand grasping my chin with surprising gentleness, turning my face to examine it more closely. "You have unusual eyes," he observed, his gaze boring into mine, like the sky before a storm. I remained perfectly still under his scrutiny, afraid even to breathe. His skin was burning hot against mine, like a fever that never broke. This close, I could see flecks of amber in his golden irises and smell the wild, earthy scent of him. Pine and musk and something primal that made my heart race with instinctive fear. "Father," Nico tugged at the king's arm, breaking the tense moment. "She has a pretty necklace, look." The king's gaze dropped to my throat, where Mother's pendant still hung. Something dark and unreadable passed over his face as he stared at the silver tree. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice suddenly tight. "It was my mother's," I replied, confused by his reaction. "She passed it to me before she died." He released my chin abruptly and stepped back. His expression shuddered once more. "The child needs warmth and dry clothes," he said. "You will come with us to the Packlands." Fear coursed through me. Humans didn't go to shifter territories unless they were servants or mates, and they rarely returned to tell of it. "Your Majesty, I should return to my village," I protested weakly. "My home." "Was that a request or a refusal?" He cut in, his voice dangerously soft. Nico looked between us, his small face scrunched in confusion at the tension. "Please come," he said, reaching for my hand. "I want to show you my toys and my room and my puppy form. I'm getting better at shifting. Father says I'm the fastest learner in the pack." The king's expression softened fractionally as he looked at his son. "Go shift and run ahead to tell the guards to prepare chambers for our guest," he instructed. "And have Mira draw a bath." Nico beamed at me. "You'll like Mira. She makes the best honey cakes." Then, with childish efficiency, he stripped off his wet clothes, shifted into a small black wolf pup, and darted into the forest with surprising speed. Alone with the Alpha King, I hugged my arms around myself, suddenly aware of how my wet dress clung to every curve. His gaze tracked the movement, lingering in a way that sent heat rushing to my cheeks despite the cold. "You're afraid," he stated, not bothering to disguise the fact that he could smell my fear. "Wouldn't you be?" I countered, then immediately regretted my boldness. But instead of anger, a hint of amusement curved his lips. "Most humans wouldn't dare speak to me so directly. I apologize." "Don't." He cut me off with a raised hand. "Honesty is refreshing." He stepped closer again, and this time I couldn't help shrinking back. He noticed, of course. "I won't harm you, Alara Blackwood. You saved my son's life. The Northern Pack pays its debts." Before I could respond, he shrugged off a leather pack I hadn't noticed slung across his back and withdrew a thick fur cloak. With surprising gentleness, he wrapped it around my shoulders, his fingers brushing against my collarbone as he secured the clasp. "Come," he said, already turning to lead the way through the forest. "Night approaches, and these woods are not safe after dark." With one last glance at the river and the distant silhouette of my village beyond it, I followed the Alpha King into the depths of the forest, Mother's words echoing in my mind. "You'll find your strength in stillness." The pendant seemed to pulse against my skin, a silent witness to the moment my life changed forever. The forest grew denser as we traveled deeper into shifter territory, ancient trees towering overhead like silent guardians. I struggled to keep pace with the Alpha King's long strides, my wet skirts heavy and cumbersome despite the warmth of his cloak around my shoulders. The fur smelled of him, that wild, earthy scent that both unsettled and strangely comforted me. "Your village elder," the king said suddenly, breaking the silence that had stretched between us. "The one with white hair and the walking stick. She still leads your people?" "Elder Marin?" I asked, surprised. "Yes, she does. How did you—" "I know more about your village than you might think." He ducked beneath a low-hanging branch without breaking stride. "We keep watch over all who dwell near our borders." A shiver ran through me that had nothing to do with my damp clothes. How often had shifter eyes been on us, observing our daily lives while we remained oblivious? The thought was unsettling. "And you," he continued, glancing back at me with those unnerving golden eyes. "You live alone now, since your mother passed." It wasn't a question. "Yes," I answered anyway, unease crawling up my spine. "How do you know about my mother?" He ignored my question. "No father? No siblings? No mate?" "My father died when I was young. And no siblings or mate." The word felt strange on my tongue. Humans married. Shifters mated. The distinction seemed important somehow. He made a non-committal sound, forging ahead through the underbrush. I noticed he was careful to hold branches aside for me to pass, though he offered no other courtesies. "Did you know my mother?" I pressed, unwilling to let the subject drop. His earlier reaction to my pendant suggested something more than casual knowledge. The king's broad shoulders stiffened almost imperceptibly. "Your mother occasionally traded with our pack," he said after a pause. "Herbal remedies. She had knowledge that was useful to us." Before I could question him further, the trees opened into a clearing, and I gasped at what lay before us. Stories of the Northern Pack's strongholds circulated among village children, each tale more fantastic than the last. The reality was both more mundane and more impressive than any of those childhood fables. Stone walls rose from the forest floor, seamlessly incorporated into the natural landscape, as if they'd grown from the earth itself. The fortress was vast, sprawling among the trees rather than clearing them, embracing rather than conquering the forest. Torches flickered along the walls, casting dancing shadows across intricate carvings of wolves and ancient symbols. Guards posted at the enormous wooden gates straightened as they caught sight of us. Or rather, as they caught sight of their king, their gazes slid over me with barely concealed curiosity and something else. Wariness, perhaps, or suspicion. "Open the gates," the king commanded, his voice carrying the unmistakable weight of authority. The massive gates swung inward without a sound, revealing a bustling courtyard beyond. Activity seemed to pause as we entered, dozens of eyes turning in our direction. Some in human form, others as wolves, all watching with the same intense curiosity as I passed beneath the ancient archway with their alpha. "Father! Ilara!" Nico's voice cut through the hushed whispers, and I saw him running toward us, human once more and dressed in clean clothes, his dark hair still damp. He skidded to a stop before his father, then threw his arms around my waist in an exuberant hug that nearly knocked me off my feet. "I told everyone how you saved me," he announced proudly. "Mira says you're the bravest human she's ever heard of." A woman approached behind him, tall and striking, with copper hair and amber eyes that marked her as a shifter. "My king," she said with a respectful inclination of her head before turning to me. "And you must be Ilara. I'm Mira, the pack healer." Her smile was warm, but her gaze was assessing. "Come, child. Let's get you warm and dry." The king nodded his assent. "See to her needs. I have matters to attend to." His eyes met mine briefly. "We will speak later." With that, he strode away, immediately surrounded by what appeared to be advisors and guards, their voices low and urgent. I watched him go, unsure whether to feel relieved or abandoned in this strange place. Mira placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "This way," she said, leading me toward one of the inner buildings. "Nico hasn't stopped talking about his river angel since he returned." "River angel?" I echoed, glancing down at the boy who still clung to my hand. "That's what I'm calling you," he declared with childish certainty. "Because you came from the river to save me." Something in my chest tightened at his innocent declaration. I squeezed his small hand. "I'm no angel, just someone who happened to be in the right place at the right time. The goddess puts us where we need to be," Mira said cryptically, as she led us through a series of corridors carved directly into the mountainside. Nothing happens by chance in these woods. The halls were warm and surprisingly bright, illuminated by strange glowing crystals set into wall sconces. Tapestries depicting pack history hung on the stone walls, vibrant scenes of wolves running beneath full moons, and ancient battles fought against shadowy enemies. The air smelled of wood smoke, pine, and something spicy and unfamiliar. "Here we are," Mira announced, pushing open a heavy wooden door. "These will be your chambers." I stepped inside and couldn't suppress a gasp. The room was larger than my entire cottage, with a massive four-poster bed dominating one wall, draped in furs and soft-looking fabrics. A fire crackled in a stone hearth, casting golden light across polished wooden floors. A copper bathtub stood before the fire, steam rising from the water within. "I've laid out some clothes," Mira said, gesturing to a simple but beautiful blue dress spread across the bed. "They may be a bit long, but they'll do until yours are dry." "This is too much," I stammered, overwhelmed by such luxury. "I don't need—" "You saved our prince," Mira interrupted gently. "The pack provides for those who protect its own. Nico tugged at my hand. Do you like it? I helped pick the room. It has the best view. He pointed to a window cut into the stone, where the forest canopy spread out below, a tapestry of autumn colors in the fading light. It's beautiful, I admitted, touched by his enthusiasm. Thank you, Nico. I should go, he said reluctantly. Father says I have lessons even though I almost died today. He rolled his eyes dramatically, then brightened. But I'll see you at dinner. You're sitting with us at the high table. Before I could process this alarming information, he had darted out the door, leaving me alone with Mira. High table? I questioned weakly. Mira's lips twitched with amusement. Don't worry. It's not as formal as it sounds. She moved to the bathtub, sprinkling something from a small pouch into the steaming water. The scent of lavender and something woodsy filled the air. This will help with any muscle soreness from your river adventure. Take your time bathing. I'll return before dinner to escort you. When she had gone, I sank onto the edge of the bed, the events of the day finally catching up to me. Hours ago, I had been washing clothes by the river. Just another day in my quiet, unremarkable life. Now I sat in a shifter fortress, about to dine with the Alpha King of the Northern Pack. I touched Mother's pendant, drawing comfort from its familiar weight. What would she make of all this? She had never spoken of trading with the shifters, of having knowledge that was useful to them. What else had she kept from me? The bath called to my aching muscles, and I finally gave in. Stripping off my damp dress and slipping into the fragrant water. Heat seeped into my bones, and I closed my eyes, letting tension drain away. Whatever awaited me at dinner, at least I would face it clean and warm. Later, dressed in the borrowed blue gown that fit better than expected, I stood at the window watching twilight deepen over the forest. Mira had returned as promised, bringing with her a silver comb that she used to tame my damp blonde hair into an elegant twist at the nape of my neck. The king has noticed you, she remarked casually as she worked, her nimble fingers deft and gentle. That's unusual. Noticed me? I echoed, uncertain of her meaning. She met my eyes in the small mirror on the dressing table. He could have sent guards to escort you here. Instead, he brought you himself. I saved his son, I pointed out. Perhaps he felt obligated. Mira's smile was knowing. Our king doesn't do anything out of obligation alone. She secured the last strand of my hair with a small silver pin. There, simple but elegant. I hardly recognized myself in the mirror. The blue of the dress brought out the gray blue of my eyes, and my usually pallid complexion had a hint of color from the day's excitement. I looked alive, somehow, in a way I hadn't since before Mother died. It's time, Mira said, offering me a reassuring smile. Don't worry. Just be yourself. That seems to have worked well enough so far. The great hall was alive with energy and noise when we entered. Dozens of pack members gathered at long tables, eating, drinking, and conversing with the easy familiarity of family. A large hearth dominated one wall, above which hung an enormous wolf skull adorned with ancient symbols. The high table sat upon a raised dais at the far end of the room, where the king already sat with Nico beside him. The room quieted as Mira led me between the tables, curious eyes following our progress. I kept my gaze fixed ahead, my hand clutching Mother's pendant beneath the fabric of my dress. The weight of so many predatory stares made my skin prickle with awareness. The king rose as we approached, his golden eyes glinting in the firelight. He had changed into formal attire, a deep blue tunic embroidered with silver thread that accentuated the breadth of his shoulders, leather breeches, and boots that reached his knees. His dark hair was pulled back, emphasizing the strong lines of his face and the scar that marked his temple. "Alara," he greeted, his deep voice carrying in the now hushed hall. "Join us." Nico beamed at me, patting the empty seat beside him. "I saved you a place." I took the offered seat, acutely aware of the king on Nico's other side. A servant appeared with a goblet of rich red wine, which I accepted with murmured thanks. "To our guest," the king announced, raising his own goblet, "who proved today that courage knows no species." A rumble of approval went through the hall, and the tension eased somewhat as conversation resumed. Food began to arrive, platters of roasted meat, forest vegetables, crusty bread, and bowls of berries preserved from summer's bounty. "Try this," Nico urged, placing a slice of venison on my plate. Father hunted it himself. I took a small bite, and flavor exploded across my tongue. It's delicious, I said truthfully. The king watched me with those unsettling golden eyes. You're not eating much, he observed. Is our food not to your liking? No, it's wonderful, I assured him quickly. I'm just overwhelmed. Something like understanding crossed his face. Of course. It's been an eventful day. Nico tugged at my sleeve. Tell father how you swam to me, he demanded. He wasn't there for that part, so I found myself recounting the rescue, aware of the king's intense gaze as I described fighting the current to reach his son. When I mentioned the pendant growing warm against my skin just before I heard Nico's cries, both the king and Mira, who sat across from us, exchanged a quick glance. Mother said it would guide me, I said, touching the silver tree through my dress. I always thought she meant it metaphorically. But today, your mother was wise in many ways, the king said quietly. And not everything she knew was shared with the village. I set down my fork, frustration rising. You keep hinting at things without explaining. How did you know her? What aren't you telling me? The hall had grown quieter again, shifters listening openly to our exchange. The king's expression hardened, but before he could respond, a commotion at the entrance drew everyone's attention. A shifter in half-transformation, human form but with claws extended and eyes glowing amber, burst into the hall. My king, he gasped. Hunters at the southern border. They've wounded 2 of our scouts. The relaxed atmosphere vanished instantly. The king rose to his feet, his presence suddenly filling the room with palpable authority. How many? 12 at least, the messenger reported. They're carrying silver weapons. A ripple of unease went through the hall. Everyone knew silver was lethal to shifters, burning them like acid and preventing their rapid healing. Prepare the response team, the king commanded. No one attacks my pack without consequence. As warriors began to move with practiced efficiency, Mira appeared at my side. Come, she said quietly. This is pack business. I rose to follow her, but the king's voice stopped me. Ilara stays. Mira looked surprised but bowed her head in acquiescence. Nico had already been whisked away by a stern-looking older woman who I assumed was his caretaker or tutor. When the hall had emptied of all but the king's inner circle and myself, he turned to me, his expression grave. Those hunters likely came from your village. What? No, I shook my head vehemently. Our village has a treaty with the Northern Pack. We don't hunt on your lands. Treaties can be broken, said a gruff-looking shifter with a silver streak in his dark beard. Humans are opportunistic, not my people, I insisted, though doubt crept in. How well did I really know the hunters of our village? I kept to myself, focused on my herb garden and occasional work as a seamstress. What if secret hunting parties had been venturing into shifter territory? We should question her, another advisor suggested, eyeing me with suspicion. She appears conveniently when the prince is alone, and now hunters breach our borders. The king silenced him with a look. She saved my son at risk to herself. She is not part of this. Then let her prove it, the silver-bearded shifter challenged. If she knows these hunters, she can help us resolve this without bloodshed. The king's gaze bore into mine, searching. Would you do this? Stand with us against your own kind? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with implications. I thought of the village that had grown increasingly distant since Mother's death, of Elder Marin's thinly veiled suggestions that I should marry soon, or consider leaving to find work in the larger towns. I thought of Nico's trusting smile, and the way he'd called me his river angel, and I thought of Mother's pendant, warm against my skin the moment before I heard Nico's cries, as if it had been guiding me to him all along. They are not my kind if they break treaties and harm innocents, I said finally, my voice stronger than I felt. I will help you, but I will not see anyone killed if it can be avoided. These may be misguided hunters, not malicious ones. Something shifted in the king's expression. Approval, perhaps, or respect. Then you will come with us, he declared, and we will see what manner of hunters threaten my borders. As the advisors dispersed to prepare, the king moved closer, his voice low enough that only I could hear. You surprise me, Ilara Blackwood. I surprise myself, I admitted, wondering what Mother would think of me now. Standing in a shifter stronghold, preparing to confront hunters from my own village. His hand came to rest on my shoulder, warm and heavy. "Keep doing that," he said, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. "And we might just get along." The forest was transformed by moonlight. Familiar shapes rendered strange and ethereal in the silver glow. We moved swiftly through the trees. A small contingent led by the king himself, 5 shifters in human form, and me, struggling to keep pace. The king had insisted I wear a heavy cloak, lined with fur against the night's chill, its hood pulled up to shield my pale hair from the moonlight. "Stay close," he murmured, his hand at my elbow as we navigated a particularly treacherous slope. His touch was brief, but steadying, his skin radiating that unnatural warmth that seemed characteristic of his kind. The silver-bearded shifter, Ronan, I'd learned, moved ahead as our scout, his senses keener than the others. The king had explained that Ronan had been his father's beta, and now served as his own chief advisor. The old wolf clearly distrusted me, his eyes tracking my every movement as we prepared to depart. "The border is just beyond that ridge," the king said, pointing to a line of hills silhouetted against the night sky. "We'll approach downwind. If these are indeed hunters from your village, I want you to speak to them first. Convince them to leave peacefully." I nodded, fear and determination warring in my chest. "And if they refuse?" His expression hardened. "Then we do things my way." We crested the ridge in silence. The valley below spread out like a dark blanket pricked with pinpricks of light, a campfire. Ronan signaled for us to halt, dropping to a crouch behind a fallen log. We gathered around him, the king's warmth at my side both comforting and distracting. 8 men, Ronan reported in a low growl, armed with crossbows and silver-tipped bolts. "They've got 2 of our scouts, Devon and Kira, tied to a tree. The young ones were doing a standard patrol when they were ambushed." My heart sank as I peered over the log. Even from this distance, I recognized several of the hunters, men from my village who regularly brought game to the market. What were they doing in shifter territory, and with silver weapons no less? "I know them," I whispered. "The tall one with the red beard is Gareth. The others are his hunting party, but I don't understand. They've never shown hostility toward shifters before." "People can surprise you," the king said grimly. "Not always pleasantly." Ronan's nostrils flared as he scented the air. "There's another scent mixed with theirs. Something wrong." The king inhaled deeply, his eyes narrowing. "Blood magic," he growled, the words sending a chill down my spine. "Someone's been working old dark spells. These men may not be acting entirely of their own will." "Blood magic?" I echoed, alarmed. Such practices were forbidden in both human and shifter territories, rituals that twisted natural law and bound the will of others. "Who would—" "Questions for later," the king cut in. "Now we need a plan." His golden eyes fixed on me. "Can you approach them alone? Will they trust you?" I swallowed hard. "I can try." Gareth was a friend of my father's. He might listen to me. The king nodded once, decision made. "Go to them. We'll be watching." At the first sign of danger, we intervened. Ronan looked ready to object, but a single glance from his alpha silenced him. Instead, he pressed a small dagger into my hand. "Just in case," he muttered. The king's hand closed over mine before I could respond, his fingers warm against my chilled skin. "You won't need that," he said, taking the blade from me and returning it to Ronan with a pointed look. "We'll be watching. No harm will come to you." The certainty in his voice steadied me. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and began making my way down the slope toward the campfire. "Gareth!" I called out, when I was close enough for them to hear. "It's Alara, from the village." 8 heads snapped in my direction, crossbows raising instinctively before recognition dawned. "Alara?" Gareth stepped forward, his familiar face lined with confusion. "What in the goddess's name are you doing out here? These woods aren't safe, girl." I moved closer, hands slightly raised to show I carried no weapons. Behind Gareth, I could now see the 2 young shifters bound to a tree, a boy and a girl no older than 16, their eyes wide with fear and pain. The girl's arm bore a vicious burn, likely from contact with silver. I could ask you the same, I replied, keeping my voice calm despite the anger building in me at the sight of the captives. You're in Northern Pack territory, Gareth. You've broken the treaty and taken hostages. Why? The men exchanged uneasy glances. Something was off about them. Their movements too stiff, their eyes slightly unfocused. These beasts have been stealing our livestock, one of the younger hunters spat. 3 cows gone in a fortnight. The Northern Pack doesn't need to steal livestock, I countered. They have their own hunting grounds, their own herds. Doesn't matter, Gareth said, though something in his expression suggested internal conflict. Orders are orders. We're to clear this section of forest, drive the beasts back to their mountain. Orders? I frowned. From whom? Elder Marin would never sanction breaking the treaty. A shadow crossed Gareth's face. New leadership, he said vaguely. Things are changing in the village, Alara. You've been too wrapped up in your grief to notice. New leadership? I'd been absent from village affairs since Mother's death, but surely something so significant would have reached me. Whatever's happening in the village, this isn't the way, I said, gesturing to the bound shifters. These are children, Gareth. Look at them. Something flickered in his eyes, doubt, maybe, or a moment of clarity breaking through whatever influence clouded his mind. He glanced at the captives, and his shoulders sagged slightly. It wasn't supposed to go this far, he admitted. We were just meant to mark territory. But then we found these 2 watching us and... He trailed off, rubbing his temple as if fighting a headache. Let them go, I pleaded, taking another step forward. Come back to the village with me. We'll speak to the elders about whatever grievances. We can't go back empty-handed, another hunter interrupted, his grip tightening on his crossbow. You don't understand what's at stake, then help me understand, I said, spreading my hands. What's happened in the village that would turn you against neighbors we've had peace with for generations? Gareth opened his mouth to answer, but a strange expression crossed his face, pain mixed with confusion. His hand went to his chest, where I now noticed a small amulet hanging from a cord around his neck. All the hunters wore identical ones, small clay discs inscribed with symbols I didn't recognize. We can't... Gareth's voice sounded strained. The master said we must bring proof. Shifter pelts or captives. The master. That word sent a chill through me. It wasn't a term anyone in our village would use. Something was very wrong here. Gareth, I said carefully, take off the amulet. Just for a moment, please. His hand closed around it protectively, but indecision warred on his face. I'd known this man my entire life. He'd taught me to identify animal tracks when I was a child, had brought meat to our cottage when times were lean after Father died. This wasn't him. The binding spell is in the amulets, came a low voice beside me, making me jump. The king stood there, having approached silently while I was focused on Gareth. He must have shifted to reach us undetected, as he now wore only the leather breeches from earlier, his chest bare in the moonlight. The hunters reacted instantly, crossbows swinging toward him. I stepped in front of him without thinking, hands raised. Stop. This is the Alpha King of the Northern Pack. If you harm him, there will be war. Stand aside, Alara, Gareth commanded, though his voice wavered. The king's hand settled on my shoulder, gently but firmly moving me to stand beside rather than in front of him. Your concern is noted, he murmured, his eyes never leaving the hunters, but unnecessary. He addressed the men directly, his voice carrying the unmistakable weight of command. Who gave you those amulets? The hunters shifted uncomfortably, the amulets at their chests seeming to glow faintly in the darkness. They can't tell you, I realized aloud. It's part of the binding. The king nodded. Blood magic works that way. It leaves gaps, things the bound cannot speak of or act against. He studied the men thoughtfully, but there are always weaknesses in such spells. They cannot be forced to harm themselves, for instance. Understanding dawned. Gareth, I said urgently, the amulets are hurting you. They're controlling you. Taking them off would be self-protection, not defiance. Conflict raged across his features. His fingers toyed with the cord around his neck. then dropped away. "I can't," he whispered, genuine fear in his eyes now. "We can't." Before I could respond, movement erupted from the trees around us. The rest of our party had circled around, and now Ronan and the others emerged from the shadows, surrounding the hunters. "Enough talk," Ronan growled, claws extended. "These men invaded our territory and hurt our young. They face pack justice." The hunters raised their weapons, and for a terrible moment, I thought bloodshed was inevitable. Then the king stepped forward, power radiating from him in almost visible waves. "Lower your weapons," he commanded, his voice deepening to something more than human. "Now!" To my astonishment, the hunter's arms wavered, then slowly lowered. The king's alpha influence was pushing against whatever spell bound them, creating a battle of wills I could almost see in their strained expressions. "The amulets," the king said to me without taking his eyes off the hunters. "We need to remove them." I nodded and approached Gareth cautiously. "Let me help you," I said softly. "Please." "This isn't you, Gareth. You taught me which berries were safe to eat. You carried me on your shoulders at the harvest festival when I was small. You're not someone who hurts children, no matter what species they are." Something in his eyes cleared slightly. With trembling fingers, he reached for the cord around his neck. The amulet seemed to pulse angrily as he touched it, but with a sudden jerk, he ripped it off and threw it to the ground. He gasped as if surfacing from deep water, blinking rapidly. "Ilara? Where are we?" The other hunters looked on in confusion and fear. 2 more gathered the courage to remove their amulets, but the others seemed paralyzed with indecision. The king moved with blinding speed, tearing the remaining amulets from the hunters' necks before they could react. As each clay disc left its wearer's skin, the men's expressions cleared, confusion replacing malice. Ronan and the other shifters quickly relieved them of their weapons, while the king went to free the captive scouts. The young shifters clung to him, their relief palpable even from where I stood. "What's the last thing you remember clearly?" I asked Gareth, who looked increasingly horrified as awareness returned. "A stranger came to the village," he said slowly. "Offered to serve as an advisor to Elder Marin. She refused him, but he stayed anyway, gaining followers. He gave us these." He nudged the discarded amulet with his boot. "Said they would protect us from shifter magic. After that, it's all fragments, like seeing through murky water." The king rejoined us, having sent the injured scouts back to the fortress with one of our party. "This advisor," he said to Gareth, "describe him." "Tall, thin, dark hair streaked with gray, eyes like—" Gareth shuddered. "Like nothing natural. Sometimes green, sometimes black. He calls himself Thorn." The king went very still, his golden eyes flaring with recognition and what might have been hatred. "Thorn is dead," he said flatly. "I killed him myself 5 years ago." "Apparently not," Ronan growled. I looked between them, confusion mounting. "Who is Thorn?" The king's face was like stone, a blood mage who once served my father, then betrayed the pack. He nearly destroyed us from within before I stopped him. His hand unconsciously touched the scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. "He's the reason my mate died." Silence fell over our strange assembly at the king's revelation. I studied his face in the moonlight, seeing the old pain etched into the hard lines around his eyes. The mention of his dead mate explained much about him. The coldness, the distance he maintained from others. Loss had shaped him as surely as it had shaped me. "If Thorn has returned and is using blood magic to control villagers," Ronan said grimly, "we face a greater threat than we realized." The king's jaw tightened. "We need to know what he's planning." His golden gaze shifted to Gareth. "What else did this man tell you? What is his purpose in turning humans against shifters now, after years of peace?" Gareth shook his head, still disoriented. He spoke of purification, said the land must be cleansed of unnatural creatures. He looked apologetically at the king. "No offense intended, Your Majesty." Those were his words, not mine. "And Elder Marin?" I asked. "Is she safe?" "If Thorn was rejected but stayed anyway." "She's been ill," another hunter spoke up. "Bedridden for nearly a moon now." "That's when Thorn started gaining more influence," My heart clenched with worry. Elder Marin had been kind to me after Mother's death, bringing food and sitting with me during those first hollow days of grief. If she was ill and a blood mage had infiltrated the village, everyone I knew could be in danger. "We need to return to the village," I said, turning to the king. "If Thorn is the threat you say, my people need warning." "It's too dangerous," he replied immediately. "If Thorn discovers you've interfered with his puppets, you'll be his first target." "These are my people," I insisted. "I can't abandon them." Something flashed in his eyes, respect, perhaps, mingled with frustration. "Your courage is admirable, but foolish. Thorn is not an enemy you can face alone." "I'm not suggesting I face him alone, but these men need to return home, and someone needs to warn Elder Marin." The king studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to Ronan. "Take the hunters and 4 warriors. Escort them back to their village, but remain unseen. Assess the situation and report back. Do not engage Thorn if he's there." Ronan nodded, though he looked unhappy with the order. "And the human girl?" "Ilara returns with me to the fortress," the king said with a finality that brooked no argument. "She remains under my protection." I opened my mouth to object, but Gareth spoke first. "He's right, Ilara. If this Thorn is controlling people, you're safer with the shifters." He clasped my hand briefly. "We'll check on Elder Marin and send word somehow." Outvoted and outmaneuvered, I could only watch as Ronan organized the hunters and selected warriors for the escort mission. The king maintained a careful distance from me, his attention focused on giving instructions to his pack members. The easy closeness we'd shared moments earlier had vanished, replaced by the formal authority of the Alpha. When the others had departed into the darkness, the king finally turned to me. "We should return. It's not safe to linger here. You didn't tell me everything about Thorn," I said, not moving. "Or about how you knew my mother." His expression tightened. "This is neither the time nor the place for that discussion." "When then? You brought me to your territory, you involved me in pack business, but you keep me in the dark about matters that clearly concern me." I took a step closer, frustration overcoming my usual caution. "My mother's pendant, which you recognized. Thorn, who you thought was dead, but is now in my village. What aren't you telling me?" The king's eyes flashed with anger, then something like resignation. "Your mother was not just an herb woman who occasionally traded with us," he said finally. "She was our pack healer for 7 years before she left to marry your father." The ground seemed to shift beneath my feet. "What? That's impossible. My mother was human." "Yes. One of the few humans ever accepted into a shifter pack." His expression softened slightly at my shock. "She saved my father's life when he was wounded by a rival pack. In return, he offered her a place among us. She served the northern pack faithfully until she met your father and chose to leave." My mind reeled. Mother had never mentioned any connection to the shifters beyond occasional trading. Why would she keep such a significant part of her life secret from me? "The pendant," I said, touching it through my dress. "It's a pack symbol, isn't it?" He nodded. "The silver tree marks those under direct protection of the Alpha. My father gave it to her when she left, to ensure she would always have our support if needed. And Thorn? Did she know him too?" A shadow crossed the king's face. "Everyone in the pack knew Thorn. He was my father's advisor before he revealed his true nature." He paused, seeming to debate how much to tell me. "Your mother was particularly skilled at resisting his manipulations. She recognized the darkness in him before anyone else." The pieces were starting to fit together, forming a picture I wasn't sure I was ready to see. "Is that why he's in my village now? Because of some connection to my mother?" "It's possible," the king admitted. "Thorn holds grudges for lifetimes. If he learned of her death, he might see it as an opportunity to strike at both your village and my pack simultaneously." A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the night air. "Then my mother's secrets have put everyone in danger." "No," the king said sharply. "Thorn is the danger. Your mother protected many with her silence." I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly feeling very small against the vastness of this revelation. All my life, I'd known Mother as a gentle healer, a quiet woman who kept to herself, and taught me to do the same. The idea that she'd once lived among shifters, that she'd recognized and opposed a powerful blood mage, it transformed everything I thought I knew about her. The king moved closer, his warmth cutting through the chill that had settled in my bones. "We should return to the fortress," he said, his voice gentler now. "There are things you need to know, things that can't be explained quickly or in the open." This time, I nodded and followed, when he turned to lead the way back through the forest. We traveled in silence, my mind too full of questions to form coherent thoughts. The king maintained a steady pace, but occasionally glanced back to ensure I was keeping up, his golden eyes reflecting the moonlight like a true wolf's. "Why didn't she ever tell me?" I finally asked, as the fortress walls came into view, illuminated by torchlight against the night sky. "About her life with your pack, about the pendant, any of it?" The king slowed to allow me to walk beside him. "She was protecting you," he said after a moment. "Knowledge of shifter ways can be dangerous for humans. The more you know, the more likely you are to become entangled in our conflicts. Like I am now." I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. His lips curved in a faint, rueful smile. "Precisely." He glanced at me, his expression softening. "Though I suspect your mother would say you were always destined to find your way to us, one way or another." "What do you mean?" He didn't answer immediately, his attention drawn to the guards at the gate who straightened as we approached. Only when we were inside the walls, away from curious ears, did he speak again. "Your mother believed in the old ways, in fate and the goddess's design. She used to say that some souls are bound to each other across lifetimes." Something in his tone made me look at him more closely. "And you? Do you believe that?" His eyes met mine, golden and unfathomable. "I believe there are connections that cannot be explained by reason alone." He looked away. "But I also believe we make our own choices in this life, regardless of what came before." We entered the main hall, now empty, save for a few servants clearing the remains of the evening meal. The king led me toward a narrow staircase I hadn't noticed before. "Where are we going?" I asked, following him up the winding steps. "My private study. The documents you need to see are there." The study was a surprisingly warm, intimate space. Shelves of leather-bound books lining the walls, a large desk covered with maps and scrolls, comfortable chairs arranged before a small hearth where a fire still smoldered. The king added a log, stoking the flames until they cast a golden glow throughout the room. "Sit," he said, gesturing to one of the chairs while he moved to a cabinet inlaid with silver. He withdrew a wooden box, carved with the same tree symbol as my pendant, and placed it on a small table between the chairs. I sat, watching as he lowered himself into the chair opposite mine. In the firelight, with his guard momentarily lowered, he looked younger somehow, still imposing, but less remote. "Before I show you what's in this box," he said, his hand resting on its carved lid, "I need you to understand that knowledge brings responsibility. Once you know certain truths, you cannot unknow them. Your life will change. My life has already changed," I pointed out, "the moment I pulled Nico from the river." He inclined his head slightly, acknowledging the truth of my words. "Perhaps that's so. Still, I would have your consent before proceeding." I appreciated his caution, even as impatience gnawed at me. "I want to know the truth," I said firmly. "About my mother, about Thorn, about why I'm really here." The king held my gaze for a long moment, as if searching for something in my eyes. Whatever he sought, he seemed satisfied. He opened the box and withdrew a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. "Your mother's records," he said, handling the book with surprising gentleness. "She left this behind when she departed the pack. I believe she meant for it to remain here, as evidence, perhaps, or insurance." My breath caught as he placed it in my hands. Mother's handwriting filled the pages, the same flowing script that had labeled herb jars and written down recipes throughout my childhood. But the contents were nothing like her household records or healing notes that I was familiar with. "Blood magic and its countermeasures," I read from the first page, a chill running through me. I looked up at the king. "She was studying how to fight against it?" He nodded. "Your mother was uniquely resistant to Thorn's influence. She documented his techniques, his weaknesses. This journal contains the most comprehensive study of blood magic ever compiled, and methods to combat it." I turned the pages slowly, taking in diagrams of amulets similar to those the hunters had worn, lists of herbs and minerals that could strengthen or weaken magical influence, Incantations written in an ancient script I couldn't decipher. This is why he might have targeted my village, I said, understanding dawning. He knew she had this knowledge, that she might have passed it on. Yes, the king agreed, and why I believed her death might not have been natural. My head snapped up. What? Mother died of a wasting illness. I nursed her myself for months. His expression was grave. Did she? Or was that what you were meant to believe? Blood magic can mimic illness, Ilara. It consumes the victim slowly from within, leaving no trace for those who don't know what to look for. The room seemed to spin around me. Could Mother's long, painful decline have been the work of this man Thorn? Had I been watching her be murdered without realizing it? Why? I whispered, my hands tightening on the journal. Why would he wait so long to strike against her? Because he was recovering from his own near death, the king said, his hand unconsciously touching the scar on his face. Gathering his strength, biding his time. And now he's using my village as a weapon against your pack. I closed the journal, a cold clarity settling over me. We need to stop him. The king studied me, surprise and something like admiration in his golden eyes. You've had quite a shock. Most would be overwhelmed. I am overwhelmed, I admitted. But that doesn't change what needs to be done. A knock at the door interrupted us. The king called for the visitor to enter, and Mira appeared, her copper hair unbound and her expression troubled. My king, she said with a quick bow, her eyes darting to me. Ronan has returned. There's news from the village. The king rose immediately. What is it? Mira's face was grave. Elder Marin is dead, and Thorn has declared himself the new village leader. The news of Elder Marin's death hit me like a physical blow. I sank deeper into my chair. Mother's journal clutched to my chest, as if it could shield me from this latest loss. The kind old woman who had brought me soup and sat with me during my darkest days after Mother passed. Gone. And in her place, a monster who had potentially killed my mother and now controlled my village. How? I managed to ask, my voice barely audible. Mira's eyes were sympathetic as she looked at me. Poison, according to Gareth. It was made to look like her illness simply worsened, but he suspects otherwise now that his mind is clear. The king paced the length of the study, energy radiating from him in almost visible waves. What else did Ronan learn? Thorn has half the village wearing those amulets now, Mira reported. The other half are either under guard or have fled into the surrounding countryside. He's declared that the Northern Pack has broken the treaty by taking human captives, meaning Ilara, and is using that as justification to prepare for an attack on Shifter territory. He's twisting everything, I said, anger beginning to burn through my shock. Using my rescue of Nico to justify violence. The king's expression was grim. It's what he does. Takes truth and corrupts it to serve his purposes. I opened Mother's journal again, scanning the pages with new urgency. There must be something in here, some way to counter his control over the villagers. There is, the king said, coming to stand before me. But it requires someone with your mother's resistance to blood magic, someone with her blood. Understanding dawned. Me? You think I inherited her resistance? The pendant recognized you, Mira said gently. It wouldn't have responded to you, warned you about Nico, if you didn't carry her gifts. I touched the silver tree at my throat, remembering its inexplicable warmth just before I heard Nico's cries. But I know nothing about magic, or how to use such abilities. The knowledge is here, the king said, tapping the journal in my hands, and we have little time to study it. Thorn will move quickly now that he's consolidated power. My mind raced, flipping through the journal until I found a section titled, Breaking Blood Bonds. The page detailed a ritual involving silver, rowan ash, and the blood of someone resistant to the magic, mixed into water from a natural source, and used to cleanse the binding objects. I could create a counter to the amulets, I said slowly, something to break Thorn's hold on the villagers. The king nodded. It would need to be distributed widely and quickly. The village well, I suggested. If we could add the mixture to the water source, anyone who drank it would be partially protected, and any amulets washed with that water would lose their power. Clever, the king said, approval warming his voice. But getting to the well won't be easy. Thorn will have guards posted throughout the village, especially around critical resources. I can go, I said firmly. They know me. Even with Thorn's influence, they might not see me as a threat immediately. Absolutely not, the king growled. I didn't bring you under my protection only to send you directly into danger. With respect, your majesty, I said, meeting his golden gaze steadily. You didn't bring me anywhere. I came of my own free will to help Nico. And I'll go to the village of my own free will to help my people. Mira made a small sound that might have been suppressed laughter. The king shot her a dark look before returning his attention to me. You're either very brave or very foolish, he said, though there was a hint of reluctant admiration in his tone. Probably both, I admitted. But I'm also right. I have the best chance of getting close to the well without raising alarms. He studied me for a long moment, conflict evident in his expression. Finally, he gave a sharp nod. We'll develop a plan, but you won't go alone. I'll accompany you. The Alpha King cannot risk himself. Mira began to object. The Alpha King makes his own decisions. He cut her off, his voice brooking no argument. Thorn is my responsibility. He was allowed to live once, and that mistake has endangered both our peoples. I won't delegate his demise a second time. The intensity in his eyes sent a shiver through me. Not entirely of fear, there was something compelling about his determination, his willingness to place himself in danger rather than command others to go in his stead. Prepare what you need for the ritual, he told me, his tone softening slightly. Mira will help you gather the ingredients. We leave at dawn. As Mira led me to the healer's chambers to collect the necessary components, my mind whirled with everything I'd learned. Mother's secret past, my own apparent inheritance of her resistance to blood magic, the king's personal history with Thorn. It was almost too much to absorb. He's never like this, Mira commented as we gathered rowan ash and silver shavings. Like what? I asked, measuring the ingredients according to Mother's instructions. Personally involved, she clarified. Since his mate died, he's led through commands and delegation. He doesn't put himself forward unless absolutely necessary, and he certainly doesn't escort humans on dangerous missions. I paused in my work. Is it because of Nico? Because I saved his son? Mira gave me a knowing look. That's part of it. A life debt is sacred to our kind. But there's more. She hesitated, then added, He sees something in you, Alara, something that reminds him of who he used to be, before grief hardened him. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I returned my attention to the ritual preparations. By the time we had everything assembled, the silver and rowan mixture ready to be combined with my blood and river water at the crucial moment, dawn was approaching. I changed into clothes more suited for our mission. Sturdy leggings, a simple tunic, and soft leather boots that would allow me to move quietly. Mira braided my pale hair tightly against my scalp to make it less noticeable, though nothing could be done about its distinctive color. The king was waiting in the courtyard with Ronan and a small group of warriors. He too had changed, wearing dark clothing that would blend into the forest shadows. A sword hung at his hip, its hilt wrapped in silver wire, deadly to shifters, but apparently necessary against a blood mage. Are you ready? He asked as I approached, his eyes taking in my altered appearance with a quick, assessing glance. I nodded, trying to project more confidence than I felt. As I'll ever be. He turned to address the gathered warriors. Our mission is clear. Neutralize Thorn, and free the villagers from his influence. Ronan will lead the diversion at the eastern boundary. While Thorn's forces are engaged there, Alara and I will approach from the river and reach the well. Once the counter-ritual is performed, the villagers should begin to break free of his control. And if they don't? One warrior asked. The king's expression hardened. Then, we fall back to the fortress and prepare for siege. But that won't be necessary. His eyes met mine. Alara's mother knew what she was doing when she recorded these countermeasures. We'll succeed. His confidence steadied my nerves as we set out, traveling swiftly through the forest. As the sky lightened from black to deep purple, we kept to the river's course, using its sound to mask our movements. As we drew nearer to the village, the king slowed his pace to walk beside me. Stay close when we reach the outskirts, he said quietly. If we're separated, make for the well regardless. The ritual is the priority. What about you? I asked, concern tightening my chest. His lips curved in a faint smile. Worried about a predator, little human? Even predators can be wounded, I retorted, especially by silver and blood magic. The smile faded, replaced by something more serious. I'll find you, he promised, no matter what happens. We crouched at the river's edge where it curved past the village boundary. From our vantage point, I could see the well in the central square, currently unguarded. A stroke of luck. The village itself seemed unnaturally quiet, with few people moving about despite the early hour, when most would typically be starting their daily chores. Something's wrong, I whispered. It's too quiet. The king nodded, his expression grim. They're gathered somewhere, likely listening to Thorn's poisonous words. A distant commotion erupted from the eastern edge of the village, Ronan's diversion beginning as planned. Shouts and the clang of weapons carried to us on the morning air. Now, the king said, gripping my arm briefly before we emerged from our hiding place. We moved swiftly through the gardens and narrow spaces between cottages, avoiding the few villagers who rushed toward the commotion. The well stood unattended in the square, just as I'd hoped. I withdrew the pouch containing the rowan and silver mixture, along with a small knife for the blood component. The king stood guard, his attention constantly scanning our surroundings as I knelt beside the well. Hurry, he murmured. My hands shook slightly as I mixed the ingredients, adding a few drops of my blood as the journal had instructed. The mixture sizzled and turned from gray to silver, glowing faintly in the early morning light. I murmured the incantation Mother had recorded, the unfamiliar words feeling strangely right on my tongue. Just as I was about to pour the mixture into the well, slow applause broke the silence. How very touching, came a smooth, cultured voice. The trader's daughter, following in her footsteps. I turned to see a tall, thin man with dark hair streaked with gray standing at the edge of the square. His eyes shifted eerily between green and black, just as Gareth had described. Thorn. The king moved to place himself between us, his stance protective. Your quarrel is with me, Thorn. The girl is innocent. Innocent? Thorn laughed, the sound like breaking glass. With that blood in her veins? I think not. His gaze fixed on me, sending cold dread seeping into my bones. Your mother thwarted me for years, girl. Turned the old alpha against me, discovered my methods and created countermeasures. His lip curled in a sneer. Even in death, she continues to be a thorn in my side through you. Villagers began to emerge from the surrounding cottages, their movements stiff and their eyes vacant. All wearing the clay amulets. I won't let you use them, I said, rising to my feet with the mixture clutched in my hands. These are good people. They're tools, Thorn corrected coldly. As all humans should be. Your mother never understood that. Neither did his mate. He jerked his chin toward the king. The king's growl was low and dangerous. You'll die for what you did to her. This time I'll make sure of it. Thorn smiled, revealing teeth filed to points. You're welcome to try. But first, I believe my puppets would like to greet our visitors. As one, the villagers moved forward, crude weapons in their hands. I recognized faces I'd known all my life. The baker who'd slipped me extra bread when Mother was ill. The carpenter who'd repaired our roof without charging us. Children I'd played with as a girl. All now empty vessels for Thorn's will. The well, the king muttered urgently. Complete the ritual. I'll hold them off. There are too many, I protested. Trust me, he said, his golden eyes meeting mine with fierce intensity. I can handle them without causing permanent harm. I nodded and turned back to the well, aware of the sounds of struggle erupting behind me. The king moved with incredible speed, disarming villagers and knocking them aside without using his full strength against them. But there were dozens, and only one of him. I poured the mixture into the well, watching it spiral down into the darkness. The final words of the incantation fell from my lips, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then the water began to glow with the same silvery light as the mixture, illuminating the well from within. No! Thorn's outraged cry cut through the sounds of fighting. He shoved past his human shields, hands raised as dark energy gathered around his fingertips. You meddling little... The king intercepted him before he could reach me, the two of them colliding with such force that the ground seemed to shake. Thorn's magic lashed out, catching the king across the chest and drawing a pained snarl from him as it burned through his tunic. "Get water from the well," I shouted to the nearest villagers, hoping some part of them could hear me through Thorn's control. "Drink it. Wash your amulets in it." To my amazement, several hesitated, the compulsion to attack warring with my words. A young woman I recognized as the blacksmith's daughter was the first to break away. Moving jerkily toward the well as if fighting her own body, Thorn saw what was happening and howled in fury. He redoubled his attack on the king, dark magic crackling around them both as they fought, the king with fang and claw as he partially shifted, Thorn with unnatural energy that scorched the ground where it struck. I rushed to help the blacksmith's daughter, drawing water from the well and helping her drink. The effect was immediate. Her eyes cleared, and she tore the amulet from her neck with a cry of disgust. Together, we began helping others, splashing the enchanted water on faces and amulets, breaking Thorn's hold one person at a time. "Stop them!" Thorn screamed, his composure cracking as his control slipped. He caught the king with a particularly vicious blast that sent him crashing into the side of a cottage. Seeing the king fall, something ignited within me, rage and determination fusing into a cold clarity. I grabbed a bucket, filled it with the glowing well water, and moved directly toward Thorn. "Your mother died screaming," he spat when he saw me approaching. "As will you." His magic reached for me like dark tentacles, but to my astonishment, they seemed to slide around me rather than touch me directly. Mother's resistance indeed, strengthened by the ritual I'd just completed. "My mother died with dignity and love," I said, continuing forward despite the fear pounding in my veins. "You'll die with neither." Before he could respond, I flung the contents of the bucket directly into his face. The enchanted water hit him with the force of a physical blow, sending him staggering backward with a shriek of agony. Where the water touched his skin, it smoked and sizzled, revealing glimpses of something inhuman beneath his human disguise. The king was on his feet again, bleeding but unbowed. He seized the moment of Thorn's weakness, launching himself forward with inhuman speed. His partially shifted hand, more claw than human fingers, plunged into Thorn's chest. "For my mate," he growled. "For the pack. For all you've corrupted." Thorn's eyes widened in shock, the shifting colors freezing into a dull, muddy brown. "How?" he gasped, blood bubbling from his lips. "Her mother's daughter," the king said, nodding toward me. "And her mother always did see through you." With a final twist, he withdrew his hand. Something dark and pulsing clutched in his grip. Not a heart, but something similar in function, though utterly alien in appearance. Thorn's body crumpled, dissolving into ash before it hit the ground. The king crushed the pulsing organ in his fist, grimacing as it burst into foul-smelling smoke. Then he turned to me, his golden eyes bright with triumph and something warmer. Around us, villagers were coming to their senses, discarded amulets littering the ground. Some wept in confusion, others embraced loved ones as they recognized what had happened. The nightmare was over. "You did it," the king said, approaching me slowly as if concerned I might fear him after witnessing his lethal capacity. "We did it," I corrected, finding myself moving toward him without hesitation. "Your fighting skills, my mother's knowledge." He reached out, his hand, now fully human again, gently brushing a strand of pale hair from my face. "Your courage," he added softly. "Your compassion for both your people and mine." The intensity in his gaze made my heart race in a way that had nothing to do with fear. "What happens now?" I asked. "To the village? To the pack?" "Now we rebuild," he said, his hand lingering near my cheek. "Together. The boundaries between our peoples have been too rigid for too long. Your mother knew that. Perhaps it's time we honored her wisdom." "Together," I echoed, the word feeling right. Mother's pendant warmed against my skin, not in warning this time, but in affirmation. In the growing light of dawn, with villagers and shifters alike gathering in the square, the Alpha King of the Northern Pack took my hand in his, and for the first time since Mother's death, I felt not just alive, but home.